This presentation provides an overview of the TYRO project consent process and prisoner-focused protection training for volunteer mentors. The TYRO Leadership Adult Mentoring Reentry Project is a Second Chance Act grant funded by the Department of Justice that provides transition services as well as pre- and post-release mentoring to inmates who will be recruited from Richland and Turnbull correctional institutions. It includes the collection of research data and an evaluation of reentry services and mentoring services. The TYRO project will recruit volunteer mentors who will be matched with the inmates in the two prisons. Because mentors are a vital part of the reentry service interaction with the inmates and are part of the inmate data collection during incarceration and in the community, we are providing you with the specific information about participating in the TYRO project as a mentor and ask that you complete some paperwork, which is part of the data collection consent process for the TYRO project. We will ask you to sign a mentor consent form, which I am going to read to you now. Should you no longer be interested in participating as a mentor with the TYRO project, you are free to leave the training at any time. I will ask you periodically if you are still interested in participating. You are invited to be part of the TYRO Leadership Adult Mentoring Reentry Project, or the TYRO project, that provides reentry services to inmates who are preparing to be released from Richland Correctional Institution and Turnbull Correctional Institution to one of 4 Ohio cities, Cleveland, Akron, Youngstown, or Warren. We will be conducting an evaluation of the TYRO project looking at the impact of services provided on recidivism of the inmates served. Recidivism can be traced back to a lack of receiving effective services, which makes successful reentry a challenge. We plan to evaluate the effectiveness of the TYRO project, including reentry and mentoring services. As a mentor, you will work with the RIDGE project staff to be matched with one or more inmates or mentees. You will be involved in group and possibly one-on-one mentoring activities with the mentees, both before they are released and when they are re-entering their communities. Are you still interested in participating as a volunteer mentor in the TYRO project? If no, thank you for your interest and please feel free to leave this training. For those who are still interested, we will now continue with the consent overview. As part of the TYRO project evaluation, you will be asked to complete 2 surveys. The surveys ask questions about your interactions with the mentees you mentor and will take approximately 10 to 15 minutes to complete. The information you provide will be combined with information collected from the mentees and will help us evaluate the effectiveness of the TYRO project. Mentors will be asked to document all contacts with the mentees. If you intend to visit your mentees in prison, you will also be asked to complete visitor access forms required by the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. Number 1, the Mentor Initial Work with Mentee Survey. About 2 months after your background check has been approved and you are matched with an inmate, i.e. prior to your mentee's release into the community, you will be asked to answer questions about your mentoring interactions while the mentee is incarcerated in the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. 2, Mentor-Mentee Contacts Reports. You will be asked to document all contacts with your mentee or mentees, identifying activities and topics discussed, areas of progress and accomplishment, along with areas of concern that have arisen while working with that mentee. Some of these discussion topics may relate to education, physical and mental health, substance abuse, incarceration information, transportation, financial issues, housing, relationships, employment, and etc. 3, Mentor 6-month survey. Approximately 6 months after the mentee has been released from prison, we will ask that you complete a survey. The survey asks how the mentee has transitioned into the community and about your overall mentoring experience. 4, Mentor Dropout Questionnaire. We do not anticipate a need to administer this questionnaire. However, should a situation arise that you discontinue participating as a mentor, you will be asked about your experiences. Are you still interested in participating as a volunteer mentor in the TYRO project? If no, thank you for your interest and please feel free to leave the training. For those who are still interested, we will continue with the consent overview. The TYRO project investigators may stop the evaluation or take you out of the evaluation at any time. They also may remove you from the TYRO project for various other reasons. For example, if you are unable to continue mentoring, if you were to become incarcerated, or if we are unable to locate you. You can stop participating in the evaluation study at any time, but can still continue to participate as a TYRO project mentor. Mentors will receive a $5 Starbucks gift card for each mentor initial work with mentee survey they complete for each individual mentee they mentor, and a $5 Starbucks gift card for each mentor 6-month survey they complete for each individual mentee they mentor. Efforts will be made to match you with the mentee with whom you will be compatible, but it is possible that there may be personality issues or that your assigned mentee may drop out of the TYRO project. We do not anticipate that this evaluation study will involve any physical or non-physical risks, but there may be risks that we cannot predict. It is reasonable to expect that benefits from the evaluation may include that mentees experience better attainment of the goals specified in their reentry plan and also experience lower recidivism. However, we cannot guarantee that you or the mentees will personally experience benefits from participating in this evaluation study. We respect the confidentiality of the information you share with us and will make every effort to keep it confidential and to protect it. Your name will never be used in any report written for the TYRO project. However, we will have to report to the authorities if you tell any team members about someone being harmed or that you want to harm someone. Also, we may have to give up information about you if a court orders us to do so. Participation in this evaluation is voluntary. Deciding not to participate or choosing to leave the study will not result in any penalty, and it will not harm your relationship with the Ridge Project. If you decide to withdraw, we will contact you to ask a few questions about why you chose to withdraw. However, you are not required to respond to these follow-up questions. If you have questions about the TYRO Project Evaluation Study, you may contact Dr. Matthew Shepard or Barbara Sterrett. If you have any questions or concerns about your rights as a TYRO project mentor, you should contact Dr. Dana Gonzalez. Contact information for these individuals is included in the paper copy of the consent form I am going to ask you to sign. We are passing out to each of you 2 copies of the mentor consent form that I just explained. Please read it, and if you are still interested in participating as a volunteer mentor in the TYRO project, print your name, date, and then sign both copies. The facilitator will witness your signature on both copies and return 1 copy to you for your records. By signing the mentor consent form, you acknowledge that you are giving your permission to 1. To participate in the TYRO project evaluation study, and 2. To contact individuals listed in the mentor enrollment form should your contact information become outdated. We are now going to transition to prisoner-focused protection training. The Code of Federal Regulations specifies that individuals who are part of research projects must successfully complete human subjects protection training. As part of your mentoring with the TYRO project, you will be sharing information about your interactions with the inmate mentees who you are matched with. Because of this, it is important for you to understand the basic principles of human subject protection in research for incarcerated research participants who are classified as a vulnerable population. We have developed a 20-minute presentation that is focused on prisoner protections that we ask you to watch. At the end of the presentation, the facilitator will ask you to complete a 10-question quiz covering the information explained during the training. Welcome to this video webinar entitled Protecting Incarcerated Research Participants, a Training for Mentors. This presentation was developed by borrowing heavily from others who we want to acknowledge: the National Institute of Health, Solutions IRB, and Howard Stone's Prisoners as Human Subjects Clinical Researcher Reference Guide. Individuals who are part of research projects must successfully complete human subjects protection training that can take a number of hours. It is important for you as a volunteer mentor to understand the basic principles of human subjects protection in research. However, Since your interactions will be focused more narrowly on incarcerated research participants, we have developed this shortened training that is focused on prisoners instead of the broader array of protections for all research participants. We anticipate the training will run about 20 minutes. This training is divided into 4 sections. First, we'll cover the general history of research that includes human subjects along with its ethical considerations. Second, we'll review the regulations that have been put in place to codify protections so the atrocities that have occurred in the past are not repeated. Third, we will review the protections of which we must all be mindful. And finally, we will review the importance of process for obtaining informed consent for vulnerable populations. When the goals of the research are designed to make major contributions to a specific field of study, investigators may perceive that the outcomes of their studies are more important than providing protections for individual participants in the research. That's why researchers must adhere to the codes and regulations that have been put in place to provide protections to all research subjects. This training focuses specifically on the risks that research can pose to prisoners. We will review the protections that need to be considered for vulnerable populations like prisoners, and we will look at the process for recruiting prisoners and obtaining their consent to participate in research studies. Human subjects are essential to the conduct of research intended to improve human health, and because of this, the relationship between investigators and human subjects is critical and should be based on honesty, trust, and respect. The first part of the training will focus on historical and ethical considerations regarding human subject research. The ethical guidelines that govern research today were created as a reaction to ethical violations that occurred in the past, and these guidelines continue to shape how to best protect human subjects in research. The experiments conducted by Nazi physicians during World War II were unprecedented in their scope and the degree of harm and suffering to which human beings were subjected. In December of 1946, the War Crimes Tribunal at Nuremberg indicted 20 physicians and 3 administrators for their willing participation in the systematic torture, mutilation, and killing of prisoners in experiments. The Nuremberg Code was adopted as a result of the war crimes that took place during World War II as a way to guide future researchers in 5 areas of human subjects research. First, the Nuremberg Code stated that all subjects must give voluntary consent to participate in research and must be able to end participation in the experiment at any time. Second, the Nuremberg Code held that experiments should yield useful results. Research should not be engaged in on a whim or to simply repeat what is already known. Third, the risk inherent in a study must never exceed the humanitarian importance of the study. When risk is involved in a study, it must be balanced by benefit. Fourth, experiments that are likely to result in suffering, injury, pain, or death should not be conducted, and research subjects should be protected from all of these. Further, the researcher should terminate the experiment if continuation will cause suffering, injury, pain, or death. And fifth, experiments must be conducted only by scientifically qualified persons. One of the most notorious examples of the violation of the rights and welfare of human subjects was the long-term study of black males conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service in Tuskegee, Alabama. This study, of the natural history of untreated syphilis, was initiated in the 1930s and continued until 1972. The men were recruited to participate in the study without their informed consent and were misled about the procedures. By 1936, it was apparent to the researchers that many more men who had been infected with syphilis than the group of men who had not been infected had developed complications. In the 1940s, penicillin was found to be effective in the treatment of syphilis, but even with the medical advancement of penicillin, the syphilis study at Tuskegee continued, and the men in the research study were neither informed about nor treated with the antibiotic. The first accounts of this syphilis study appeared in the national press in 1972, and the resulting public outrage led to the appointment of an ad hoc advisory panel by the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, which later was split into the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services, more commonly called the HHS, to review the Tuskegee syphilis study and develop recommendations to ensure that such experiments would never again be conducted. The history of human subjects research includes many cases of imprisoned individuals who were subjected to human experimentation. The list on this page provides just a few examples of the research that prisoners have endured. Concerns about protecting human subjects of research have accumulated in the development over the years of a number of documents or statements that set forth principles by which human subjects research should be governed. Preeminent among these statements of ethical principles are the Nuremberg Code and the Belmont Report. The ethical guidelines that govern research today were created as a reaction to not only ethical violations that target prisoners, but also as protection to all human subjects. This timeline depicts the major events that have shaped the protections in place to conduct human subjects research. These principles and protections pertain to human subjects of research regardless of the subject's status as prisoners. Familiarity with these statements of ethical principles may result in a more thorough understanding of policies and laws pertaining to human subjects protection, including how such policies and laws may apply to prisoners as human subjects. In the second part of the training, we will focus on what inspired the codes and regulations that are in place today to protect human subjects involved in research. Following the public outrage over the syphilis study at Tuskegee, Congress established the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavior Research in 1974. The National Commission was charged with 1. Identifying the ethical principles to guide all research involving human subjects, and 2. Developing guidelines for the conduct of ethical research involving human subjects. In 1979, the National Commission published the Belmont Report. It is the Belmont Report that outlines the 3 key principles of respect for persons, beneficence, and justice that are used by all internal review boards to guide the decisions they make regarding research. These are the overarching principles that should be used by all researchers in the creation of their research. It is these 3 key principles, respect for persons, beneficence, and justice, that serves as the foundation of the current Health and Human Services regulations and guidelines for the ethical conduct of human subjects research supported by the HHS. The first ethical principle of human subjects research is respect of persons. At a minimum, respect of persons must include, first, that all individuals should be treated as autonomous agents, meaning that he or she can deliberate about personal choices and act upon those deliberations. And second, that those individuals who are of diminished autonomy must be protected. These individuals may be of diminished autonomy because of illness, mental disability, cognitive deficits, or immaturity. There are 4 conditions that must also be considered when exercising respect of persons. 1. Individuals agree to participate in research freely and voluntarily, without undue coercion or pressure being put upon them to participate. 2. Their consent must also be informed. They must know what the research is about and know what they are consenting to. 3. Individuals who participate in research should expect that the information they share in the context of research will be kept private, that their personal information will not be shared, and that they will be protected from damaging or embarrassing information that may be revealed during the context of research. And 4. Any individual who agrees to participate in research can decide to discontinue participation at any time, for any reason, without giving a reason, and without any penalty. Beneficence is the second ethical principle of human subjects research. Beneficence requires that persons are treated in an ethical manner, not only by respecting their decision and protecting them from harm, but also by making efforts to secure their well-being. Beneficence looks at the benefits and risks of the research being conducted. First, the study should do no harm. Second, the benefits of the research must be maximized while any harm is minimized. And third, any risk involved in the research must be justified by the benefits of the research. The term beneficence is often understood to cover acts of kindness or charity that go beyond strict obligation. In the Belmont Report, beneficence is understood in a stronger sense, as an obligation. The third key ethical principle of human subjects research is justice. Justice requires that the benefits and risks of research be evenly distributed through society. Specifically, this means that the disadvantaged must not bear the risks of research while the advantaged reap the benefits. The ethical principles for research involving human subjects described in the Belmont Report are codified in the Code of Federal Regulations 45 CFR Part 46. It is the three ethical principles identified in the Belmont Report, respect for persons, beneficence, and justice, that provide the underlying basis for the Human Services Human Subjects Regulations, or 45 CFR Part 46. Title 45 of the Code of Federal Regulations covers public welfare within the Department of Health and Human Services, and Part 46 covers the protection of human subjects. Although there are 5 subparts, our training will focus specifically on Subpart A, that focuses on basic protections and is known as the Common Rule, and Subpart C, that focuses on protections for prisoners. Subpart A, known as the Common Rule, describes protections for all human subjects, but also includes several references to prisoners as human subjects in research that are specific to how the research is funded, i.e., if funded by HHS or other federal agencies who have adopted the HHS regulations. 45 CFR Part 46.111 under Section B specifies that when some or all of the subjects are likely to be vulnerable to coercion or undue influence, such as prisoners, that additional safeguards should be included in the study to protect the rights and welfare of these subjects. Prisoners are classified as a vulnerable population because they have a compromised ability to make their decision to participate in research. The Code of Federal Regulations does not present us with an exhaustive list of what constitutes a vulnerable population. Rather, vulnerability is based upon ability to consent, risk and reward in the study, potential for coercion, and choice of subjects. In this third section of the training, we focus on what constitutes a protected population, and specifically, what institutional review boards must consider when they are determining if research that involves human subjects, but specifically protected populations, should be conducted. First, the Institutional Review Board, or IRB, will examine if the particular population is able to give consent to participate in research. This requires a certain cognitive ability to understand what will happen in the research, what risks may be involved, and that participation is voluntary. Second, the IRB will look at the level of risk involved in the study and weigh it against the level of reward that will result from the study. Minimal risk studies are more easily approved. If the risk level is above minimal risk, then there must be definite benefits to the study. The IRB will also consider if individual subjects will benefit from the study, or if the study will benefit the group to which study subjects belong. Individual benefits are given greater weight than group benefits. Third, the IRB will examine for the possibility of coercion. Some vulnerable subjects may be easily coerced because they might feel that they must participate in research to continue to be taken care of, or because a person of authority tells them to participate. Finally, the researcher's reason for choosing the particular study subjects will be considered. Generally, it is not enough simply for vulnerable subjects to be easily available for research. The research must pertain to the group of study subjects. The IRB will look specifically at the Belmont principle of justice when considering the population under study, and bearing in mind that protected populations also should not be left out of research because they are protected and extra protections may be required to include them in research. When possible, research should be designed to encourage the participation of all groups, but also protect their rights and welfare. Rather than focusing primarily on categorizing groups as vulnerable, investigators and IRBs should always recognize and avoid situations that create susceptibility to harm and coercion. It is acceptable to conduct research with vulnerable individuals if that research is designed with attention to protections in place. The National Bioethics Advisory Committee has identified 6 traits that make an individual vulnerable: cognitive or communicative vulnerability, institutional vulnerability, differential vulnerability, medical vulnerability, economic vulnerability, and social vulnerability. When we consider incarcerated research participants, their primary vulnerability is institutional vulnerability. Institutional vulnerability pertains to individuals who are under at least partial control of an institution. These individuals may be more likely to consent because they may, correctly or incorrectly, believe that consenting will confer upon them some sort of benefit, such as privileges. Research with prisoners can only be approved if it represents no more than minimal risk and minimal inconvenience to the subjects. In this final section of the training, we look at the process of consent and what constitutes informed consent for prisoners to participate in research. The informed consent process should ensure that all critical information about a research study is completely disclosed, and that any prospective subject, including prisoners, adequately comprehend and understand the research so that they can make informed choices. This communication begins with the recruitment materials and progresses through the consent form to include questions that the prisoner may ask the researcher during the consent process and at any time through the end of the research study. It is important that the potential prisoners recruited to participate in the research study be given the opportunity to ask questions about the research so that they can make the best possible decision about participating, an informed decision. The researcher must first disclose enough information to potential prisoners so that they may make an informed decision about whether or not to participate in the research. The researcher must then make sure that the potential prisoners recruited to participate in the research study comprehend and understand the information that has been disclosed to them. The entire communication process must promote a voluntary decision about participation in the research. Informed consent must be legally effective and prospectively obtained, which is generally accomplished through a written consent form that the prisoner signs after the research has been verbally explained and the prisoner has read the information outlined in the consent form. Because participation is a voluntary decision, subjects can withdraw from the study at any time. IRB members who review research involving prisoners cannot have an association with the prison or prisons, and the committee must include an additional member who is either a prisoner or who is a prisoner representative with appropriate background and experience to serve in that capacity. The additional protection for prisoners involved in research are in place because prisoners may be under constraints due to their incarceration, which could affect their ability to make a decision to participate that is truly voluntary and is free of coercion. Thank you for your participation as a volunteer mentor and for your involvement mentoring prisoners. We also appreciate that you have taken time to complete this training on protecting incarcerated research participants. We hope that you take away the importance of protecting human subjects involved in research, and particularly incarcerated research participants. You will now be asked to complete a 10-question quiz covering the information that was presented during this training. To receive a certificate of satisfactory completion, you will need to answer at least 8 of the 10 questions correctly. You will have an opportunity to take a second quiz of 10 questions in the event that you are not able to achieve a score of at least 80% on the first attempt. If your score on the second quiz falls below 80%, you will be asked to watch the training a second time and then take a third 10-question quiz.